In a quiet town not far from the trees, there lived a girl named Maya, 10 years old with curious eyes always searching for something that no one could quite name. She was born with a birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon. It rested just beneath her thumb, pale and curved, never fading. Her parents said it was just a mark, nothing more. But Maya wasn't so sure. She often stared at it for hours, lost in thought, wondering if it meant something, like a symbol or maybe even a message, one she hadn't figured out yet. As she grew, Maya felt something different about herself, though it was never loud, never obvious. It was a quiet pull, a feeling that there was something more waiting out there. While other kids her age played video games or ran through the streets, Maya found herself drawn to the sanctuary. The animals there, especially the primates, intrigued her. Their eyes weren't just eyes. They seemed to see her as if they understood. She spent hours watching them, studying their movements, their expressions. She didn't rush. She just watched, patient and still, as though something was hidden in those eyes, something that would reveal itself if she kept looking long enough. Every time she stood before the glass, she would raise her hand, the one with the crescent-shaped mark, and hold it up to the animals. She never really knew why. She just hoped that maybe one day one of them would recognize it, would recognize her. But no one ever did. Still, Maya kept coming back, again and again, as if the answer was just waiting on the other side of the glass, and far away, something or someone was watching her, waiting. Maya's visits to the sanctuary became a part of her routine, something she looked forward to each week. The morning sun would filter through the trees as she pedaled her bike down the winding path, the familiar hum of the forest in the air. Her heart would quicken as she neared the entrance, her excitement almost tangible. Today, something felt different. She didn't know why, but it was like the air around her was charged with a quiet energy. As she stepped through the gates of the sanctuary, Maya was drawn to a new enclosure. The sign beside it read, "Bakari, rescued gorilla, transferred from Africa." Maya had seen many animals, but there was something about Bakari that caught her attention. He was massive, his fur a dark, rich brown, and his eyes held a depth she couldn't quite place. He sat alone in the center of the enclosure, gazing out with a calm intensity that seemed to pull her in. Without thinking, Maya approached the glass. She pressed her hand against it, as she always did, her fingers tracing the curve of the birthmark that she had come to accept as part of her. Bakari's gaze shifted, and their eyes met. Maya froze, heart pounding. There was something in his stare, something that felt too familiar. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Maya's hand remained on the glass, the cool surface a barrier between them. And then, almost as if in response, Bakari slowly lifted his hand and pressed it gently to the glass. His large fingers almost mirrored Maya's. It wasn't an aggressive move. It wasn't out of curiosity either. It was recognition. The zookeepers standing nearby were watching in disbelief. Bakari hadn't reacted this way to any human before. They whispered among themselves, exchanging puzzled glances. One of them, an older man named Mr. Jensen, stepped closer. "Did you see that?" he asked. "That's never happened before." Maya didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. There was no logical explanation for the way Bakari had reacted to her. It wasn't just a fleeting glance. It was as if he recognized her, or something about her. She visited again the next day, and the next. Every time, Bakari seemed to notice her immediately. It wasn't just his gaze. It was the way he moved, the way he seemed to wait for her, as though he knew she would come. One afternoon after school, Maya arrived at the sanctuary just before closing time. The air was cooler, the sun setting low in the sky. As she approached the enclosure, she found Bakari standing near the glass, waiting for her. He didn't move. He simply stood there, watching her. Maya stepped up to the glass and raised her hand. To her surprise, Bakari followed suit, mimicking the gesture with a gentle, almost reverent touch. For the first time, Maya felt a connection, something deep and unspoken. It was as if Bakari was acknowledging her in a way that was impossible to explain. She could feel it in her chest, a flutter of recognition that went beyond reason. And in that moment, as she stood there with her hand against the glass, Maya knew something had changed. She didn't understand it, but she felt it. Bakari wasn't just a gorilla in an enclosure. He was connected to her somehow. She couldn't put it into words, but she knew, without a doubt, that this was the beginning of something she couldn't yet comprehend. As the days went by, Maya's visits to Bakari became more frequent. Each time she stood before the glass, her hand instinctively reaching up to meet his, something deeper seemed to pass between them. It wasn't just the way Bakari looked at her, or how he seemed to respond to her presence. It was something more, something Maya couldn't put into words. It felt as though he was waiting for her to understand something that was hidden just beneath the surface. She began to feel a strange sense of comfort whenever she was near him. There was a silent understanding, as if Bakari was quietly speaking to her through his eyes. His gaze was soft, but there was an intensity behind it, like a secret only he knew. And the more Maya visited, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to their connection than mere coincidence. It wasn't long before Maya started asking questions. To the zookeepers, to the biologists, to anyone who might know more about Bakari's past. The answers were sparse, but they told her one thing: Bakari wasn't always here. He hadn't always been a part of this sanctuary. He had been rescued from a remote research outpost in Africa after being found alone, traumatized, and disoriented. His past was a mystery, and it was something that no one fully understood. But Maya felt something in the pit of her stomach when she heard about the outpost. She didn't know why, but it triggered a memory, or maybe it was just a feeling, of something she had heard in passing, something about a woman who had once worked with gorillas at that very outpost. The name was familiar, but it didn't click immediately. It was one afternoon as Maya sat on the edge of the observation deck, watching Bakari in his enclosure, that it hit her. She turned to Mr. Jensen, the zookeeper who had always been kind to her, and asked, "Do you know who worked at that outpost before Bakari was rescued?" Mr. Jensen paused, his gaze turning thoughtful. That would have been Lena Marshall. She was a volunteer there. Brilliant woman, spent years working with the gorillas. Sadly, she disappeared under strange circumstances during an expedition. That was over 5 years ago now. Maya's heart skipped a beat. Lena? That name. She had heard it before. Her mother had said it in passing, but Maya had never thought much about it. Lena was her aunt, the sister of her mother, a woman who had mysteriously vanished years ago while on a research expedition in Africa. Maya had seen her aunt's photo once or twice, tucked away in an old family album, but she never paid much attention. She certainly hadn't known Lena had worked with gorillas. The more Maya thought about it, the more she couldn't ignore the connection. Lena had been involved with the gorillas in Africa, and Bakari had been part of the troop she worked with. Could it be possible that Bakari remembered her aunt? That somehow his connection to Lena was what had drawn him to Maya? The idea was absurd, of course, but the more Maya thought about it, the more she couldn't shake the feeling that there was some kind of link between them, something that tied her aunt, and Bakari together in ways she couldn't explain. Days passed, and the bond between Maya and Bakari deepened. Every time she visited, Bakari seemed to grow more attuned to her presence. He would wait for her, watching her intently as she approached. His gaze would soften, and he would mimic her gestures with such accuracy that it almost felt as though he was trying to communicate with her, trying to tell her something. Maya could feel it, like a message was hidden in the way he moved, in the way he interacted with her. She was beginning to realize that Bakari wasn't just responding to her. He was responding to something deeper, something from the past. And in the quiet moments, as their eyes met through the glass, Maya could sense that Bakari was waiting for her to uncover the truth, a truth that had been buried long before she was even born. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that Bakari's connection to her aunt was more than just a coincidence. As she spent more time at the sanctuary, she found herself digging deeper, piecing together fragments of information. Her mother had always been quiet about Lena's disappearance. It was a topic that seemed to be shrouded in secrecy, one that no one really wanted to talk about. But Maya wasn't ready to let it go. One evening, after dinner, Maya sat down with her mother in the living room, the weight of her questions hanging in the air. She hesitated at first, unsure of how to approach the subject, but eventually, the words spilled out. "Mom, do you remember Aunt Lena's work in Africa? Did she ever tell you about the gorillas she worked with?" Her mother's expression faltered, just for a moment. Then her face softened. "Lena loved those animals, Maya. She was brilliant with them. She spent years with them, in the wild, learning their behaviors, studying them." Maya leaned forward. But what happened? Why did she disappear? Her mother's eyes grew distant, and for a moment, it seemed like she was lost in a memory. "She was on an expedition with a team. Something happened. There was an attack. The details, they were never clear. She died protecting the gorillas. That's all we really know." Maya's heart sank. The woman in the photos, the one who had once held Bakari as a baby, had died. And now, years later, Maya stood before that same gorilla, a gorilla who seemed to recognize her in ways that defied explanation. She had always wondered why she felt such a strange connection to him. Now she realized that it wasn't just random. Bakari knew her aunt. He must have. And somehow, he recognized something in her, something that connected them both. Determined to understand more, Maya returned to the sanctuary the very next day. She needed to know everything. As she stood by Bakari's enclosure, the familiar pull in her chest returned. This time it was stronger than before. She raised her hand, her fingers hovering near the glass. Bakari's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, Maya saw a flicker of recognition, not just in his gaze, but in the way he moved. He slowly reached out, his large hand pressing against the glass, mirroring her own gesture. His expression softened, almost mournful, as if he were remembering something that he had long buried. Maya's heart raced. She couldn't explain it, but the connection between them was undeniable. She realized, in that moment, that Bakari wasn't just a gorilla in an enclosure. He was a piece of her family's past, a living link to the aunt she had never known, but whose memory seemed to live on in the eyes of the gorilla. And as Maya stood there, her hand pressed to the glass, she understood something else. Bakari had been waiting for her. He had been waiting for her to remember, to uncover the truth. Over the next few weeks, Maya spent more time with Bakari than ever before. Each visit felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. She could feel the weight of the past pressing in, as if Bakari was urging her to dig deeper, to find out what had really happened all those years ago. Maya was determined to uncover the story that had been left untold, the story of her aunt, of Bakari, and of the mysterious bond that seemed to tie them all together. Then, one day, Maya made a decision. She went to the sanctuary's office and asked to see some old records. The staff was hesitant at first, but eventually they relented, pulling out files from the years before Bakari was rescued. Among the papers was a faded photograph of a young woman, Lena, holding a baby gorilla in her arms. The gorilla's eyes were wide, filled with an intelligence that Maya had seen in Bakari's gaze. And there, on the woman's wrist, was a crescent-shaped birthmark. Maya's breath caught in her throat. It was the same mark as hers, a sign, a connection that spanned time and space. It wasn't just coincidence. It wasn't just a memory. It was something more, something that was still alive in Bakari. The revelation left Maya in awe. She stood there, staring at the photograph, feeling the weight of the past settling on her shoulders. Bakari hadn't forgotten. He hadn't forgotten her aunt, and he hadn't forgotten the bond they had shared. And now he was reaching out to Maya, passing on the memory that had been buried for so long. The more Maya learned, the more she realized that her connection to Bakari was something extraordinary. The photo, the mark, the undeniable recognition in his eyes, it all pointed to something deeper. It wasn't just a random series of events. There was a story here, a story that had been hidden away for years, waiting to be uncovered. As she stood in the sanctuary office, the weight of the discovery pressed down on her. Bakari's past and her aunt's were more intertwined than she had ever imagined. Determined to understand fully, Maya returned to the sanctuary every day. With each visit, she felt the bond between her and Bakari grow stronger. She no longer saw him just as a gorilla in an enclosure. He was a piece of her family's history, a living reminder of the woman she never had the chance to know. And yet, through him, it was like her aunt was still there, watching, waiting, and guiding her, even from the other side. One afternoon, as Maya stood near the glass, Bakari did something he had never done before. Instead of waiting for her to raise her hand, he slowly approached the glass, his massive form casting a shadow over her. He reached out with his long fingers, gently touching the pane as if he were trying to reach through to her. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she placed her hand against the glass in response, mirroring his gesture. This time, however, Bakari didn't simply hold the position. He pressed harder, pushing his palm against the glass, as though trying to communicate something that transcended words. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She knew, without a doubt, that this was a moment of significance. Bakari wasn't just mimicking her, he was trying to convey something. There was a message in his touch, a message that had been passed down through the years, from her aunt to him, and now, through him, to Maya. It was as if he was asking her to carry the weight of that connection, to remember the bond that had been forged long before her birth. The realization was overwhelming. Maya stood there, staring into Bakari's eyes, feeling the profound depth of the moment. She knew she had been chosen for something she had always felt in the quiet corners of her heart. She wasn't just Maya, the girl with the birthmark. She was the bridge between two worlds, the world of her aunt, lost to time, and the world of Bakari, who still held the past in his memory. The next day, Maya went back to the sanctuary, but this time, she wasn't just there to visit. She was there with a purpose. She had spent hours thinking about everything she had learned, the connection between Bakari and her aunt, the mark that tied them together, and the message that Bakari seemed to be sending her. Maya needed to find out what it meant. She needed to know what the next step was in this strange, unspoken journey. Standing before Bakari's enclosure, Maya felt a new sense of purpose. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She had been jotting down everything she had learned so far, every moment that felt important, every discovery that felt like it was leading her to something bigger. As she flipped through the pages, she stopped on a drawing she had made, a simple sketch of the crescent-shaped birthmark, followed by a few lines that represented Bakari's hand, pressed against the glass. It was a symbol, she realized, a symbol of a connection that spanned time and space, of memories shared and bonds unbroken. Maya raised her hand to the glass once again, feeling the familiar pull as Bakari's eyes locked onto hers. This time, when he reached out, she didn't hesitate. She placed her palm against the glass, her fingers tracing the mark on her skin. She knew, in that moment, that Bakari was asking her to remember, to carry on the legacy of her aunt, to honor the bond that had been shared between them. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the future, about what Maya was going to do with the knowledge she had uncovered. And as she stood there, with her hand pressed to the glass and Bakari's hand mirroring hers, Maya felt a sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers, and she didn't know where this strange journey would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. The connection between her, Bakari, and her aunt was real. It was something that transcended time and space, something that bound them together in ways that no one could explain. And now, it was her turn to carry that legacy forward.